as you all know, we're moving through the holding environment again in some detail in a slightly different way, taking each part, parsing it out. Yesterday was body, inviting the body, and the body, its participation in creating the holding environment. And today is the breath. The breath. Yeah. And we can see the practice of meditation through many different lenses, frames. One of them is it's a psychophysical unbinding, that we're tight, that we're contracted, that we're armored, that we learn that early on in life. And that armoring and that tightening and that constricting and that walling off and that protecting, that tendency to protect, once we discover that apparently there's a self here that needs protecting, is part of the landscape. It's actually part of the water that we swim in. That kind of tightening, and it's part of what shows up when we start meditating. Someone mentioned yesterday not recognizing how much their jaw was clenched on a regular basis. In our sharing last night, and this is part of what can show up. And so, part of the invitations in creating the holding environment is how do we begin to soften or unbind what we can soften or unbind around, begin to unwind around, begin to release, begin to open to. I know in the old days, there was more of a sense of, well, I think Susan said it yesterday, it was just kind of, just sit down and start paying attention, And with the breath, the instruction most commonly was don't do anything with the breath. Just pay attention to it the way it is. Now, I know I did that for a long time, but the way it was tight. The way it was kind of shallow, was kind of constricted, was kind of, and the attitude was kind of controlling. So I would close my eyes, and what I'd be aware of is a controlling attitude and a tight breath. And who needs more of that? It was not so effective. It ended up, the crankiness, irritability. Oh, now I'll label it crankiness. I'll label irritability. Okay. But where is the holding environment in all of that? And how are we supposed to set up a spacious mind, allowing and spacious attitude in a tight and constricted body and breath? Yeah. And so this may seem, it may seem for some of you who's received some of the same instructions that we received, that this is kind of radical, suggesting, and what Susan's suggesting is that we could actually give ourselves permission to move a little bit. It is radical, but it also makes such good sense, doesn't it? And we're not talking about moving all the time, but with discernment, knowing, checking in. Where is it? Where can we let go a little bit here? And similarly with the breath, I want to give you an example from, just so you know, yeah, we are discovering some things out of our own practice. Of course, this is where some of our orientation comes from, for sure. But Thanissaro Bhikkhu, who many of you may know, very well-renowned, well-regarded monk, teacher. If anything, he's on the left side of orthodoxy. He's fairly conservative teacher, traditional teacher. Here's a little book I found here. It's one of these free books that they have, that these get published here, and it's called With Each and Every Breath. And this is called, this chapter called Focusing on the Breath. I just want to give you an example here. This is Thanissaro Bhikkhu. Now you're ready to focus on the breath. There are 6 steps. Now I'm not going to go through 6 steps, but here's what the first step is. Listen to the first step. Find a comfortable way of breathing. Start by taking a couple of deep, long and out breaths. This helps energize the body and makes the breath easier to observe. As you continue breathing, notice where a sense of strain develops in the body toward the end of the in-breath, or where there's a sense of squeezing the breath out toward the end of the out-breath. Ask yourself if you can relax those sensations with the next breath as you maintain the same breathing rhythm. Can you breathe out at the same rate without squeezing it out? Try changing the rhythm and texture of the breath. Experiment with different ways of breathing to see how they feel. You can make the breath longer or shorter. You can try faster or slower, deeper or more shallow, heavier or lighter, broader or more narrow. When you find a rhythm that feels good, stick with it as long as it feels good. Okay? If it doesn't feel good, you can adjust the breath again. Just wanting to place that in some context here, that while you may not have had this kind of recommendation, we're not alone, entirely alone in this kind of recommendation. I'm guessing that teaching comes, like a lot of the compassion teachings that are coming forward now in practice in North America, because we are so tight. Because we are so tight, with the recognition that maybe we need even some extra attention, to our tightness here. Yeah? And so from the beginning, in setting up the holding environment with body and now with breath, we're infusing from the beginning, in every smallest step, a kindness, a generosity, an ease, as if there was, Susan was saying yesterday, there's something living going on here. This is a sensitive organism. It's not just something we drag along with us, this body and this breath, which we take for granted, this casual breath, yeah, sure, I know it's the breath, but when I pay attention to it, it's kind of boring. It's dry, it's boring. Part of the practice is bringing some sensitivity and some care right there. Not rushing to see what the mind has to say. The mind will always want to rush in and take center seat, in our practice. But more important for us is the setting up the conditions here, setting up the conditions for our practice, starting with settling the body a bit and beginning to notice where that's tight, and now the breath as well. So we'll encourage you throughout the day. We'll talk about this more later for those of you who are in the retreat. How to play with this, how to play with the breath, how to explore the breath, how to soften it. What leads to more softening? What leads to more ease and spaciousness of the breath? How do I bring kindness to the breath? What a radical notion. Not by saying nice things to it, but through the move itself. Sure, it helps, of course, to say cognitively nice things to it too, as we're doing that. Ajahn Brahman in Australia, also monk, talks about the beautiful breath, creating the breath to be beautiful. How do we do that? What are the moves involved in relating to this breath somewhat differently as something quite amazing, right? Something quite amazing, this breath of life. How do I, when I return to the breath, not just, back to the focus, back to attending to the sensations of the breath, which, as you may have heard me say, can be about as interesting as watching the second hand of a clock go around. Yeah? How do I come back to it as if, what is this? What is this miracle moving through me here? This breath of life. Do you know? How is it that we forget? How can we remember to attend to it in this kind of way and to soften it as we do so? Yeah? Okay? So this is what we turn our attention to today. Yeah? The breath. Someone said yesterday, one instruction all day long. Yeah, how is the breath today? We'll give you some ideas about how to tune into that during the day. But for now in our meditation, see how it is. See how it is. See if you can, what does it mean to give yourself permission to find a comfortable breath, a soft breath, a soothing breath, a tender breath, a friendly breath, a warm breath. Yeah? What is it? What is it? How do I invite that? Create the conditions for it? How do I keep it around? How do I invite it back when it starts to tighten? How do I hold that in? How do I hold that? How do I move in that direction? Okay?